At the outset, thank you, Professor Talukdar, for this real honor of being here on National Science Day and amidst this extremely young and brilliant minds. It's truly made my day. Now we're going to shift gears, and we're going to shift gears enormously because we're coming from macrocosm to what is a microcosm, our own human body, and in fact, the even littler thing that is our brain, right? So I think till date, we don't have a computer which is bigger than our own brain, right? This is one supercomputer which no one could really simulate till now. So if I'm standing right here, addressing you, looking at you, talking to you, listening to you, if I'm planning, I have a memory, I have a strategy, what to do next, it's all because my brain is giving the signals, whether right or wrong. So if the brain doesn't give you any signals, your body freezes. And if the brain dies, the body dies. So the concept of a brain death is that even if the heart keeps beating and the brain is dead, one is equal to being dead, right? So I'm going to take you to a very short journey of what our brain is all about, and the probably the commonest cause of a brain problem and what we can do to keep it a little bit healthy and have a functional life. This is going to apply to all of us, young, old, whatever, rich, poor, whatever. Okay? When we're talking about the brain, each and every part, a minuscule area of the brain is controlling something. So you have areas which are, say, what is projecting? This is a frontal lobe, there's a parietal, there's a temporal, there's an occipital lobe. And each part of the brain is required for particular functions. So broadly, what are our main functions? We need to see, we need to smell, hear, we need to walk, and we need to talk, isn't it? And perceive. So the major functions of our ability to move, ability to perceive, speech, language, all these sort of, there are particular areas of the brain. So you have the motor cortex, you have the sensory cortex, you have, this is the language area, so on and so forth. The reason I put this up is, unlike the rest of the body, wherein, there's a little cut here, it'll heal. But if you have something injuring the brain, that particular function is lost. So that's the importance of the brain. And no wonder this is the only area that God Almighty thought it should be encased in a natural helmet, isn't it? So our natural helmet is the skull. You think we have any other bony structure? No. The heart and the lungs have a little bit of a bony structure, which are ribs, which have a lot of spaces in between. But the only closed bone structure which is housing a soft thing is the brain. Isn't it? That's the reason they say that you must wear helmets when you travel on the road, because even God Almighty thought that this needs to be protected, so you better protect it. You just have one brain. Now, this slide is actually to tell you that the brain has an extremely complex and extremely rich supply of blood, because brain doesn't have anything to store anywhere. So the liver is there to store the glucose, so you can go fasting. You do karwa chauth and you do this 24 hours fasting and all, because the liver keeps producing a little bit of glucose. Brain doesn't have anything to store. There's no storehouse. It needs this blood every second of its existence. So you cut off a blood supply. Remember what happens? Somebody tries and catches hold of your neck. What happens? You will lose consciousness, isn't it? So that's how, you try and be without oxygen for 3 minutes, you lose consciousness. That's because there is no storage house in the brain. So if there is a blood vessel and the blood is going on, and if there is something which is cutting off the blood supply, there's no oxygen and glucose going to that part of the brain, that part of the brain dies. And obviously, whatever the function that part of the brain is supervising gets cut off immediately. It's an ASAP. That's the reason, you all heard about Sri Devi ji and heart attack. So you have something similar happening, what we call as a brain attack. So we'll talk about brain attack a bit. Very recently, November 2017, there was a publication, and in fact, this was in the news. And the publication came out in one of the greatest, biggest medical journals called Lancet. It's a huge impact factor, which was about state-wise disease burden in our country. India is called a nation of nations, all right? Because we have such diversity in our, social, economic, our racial, our ethnic, our language. Like you have a north and the northeast, we have the central part of India, you have the south, and you have the western part. We are vastly different, even language. Now, I don't understand SMEs. Uh, you won't understand probably a lot of South Indian languages. So the diversity itself has made India a nation of nations. So there was they said, okay, now you take Switzerland or you take UK, you have probably, okay, you have a multicultural aspect because of the migrations of populations. Otherwise, it's one race and you have one language and you have one type of disease burden. Our country is different. So what is applicable to Bombay may not be applicable to Guwahati. So, and when they actually looked into disease statistics, they found that on an average, tell me, what do you think is the most common cause of death of a disease? And in fact, in this Seven Sisters in Northeast, the number one cause of death, I mean, forget about diarrhea, forget about malaria, forget about tuberculosis, is stroke. Did you all know that? I'm asking you, the scientists. Did you know this? And this is November 2017 publication, that in the Northeast, the number one cause of death, it's actually overtaken heart attacks. And when you divide the rest of the country into economically empowered or the economic transition zones, where Northeast is still in the lower half, but making a great progress, especially Assam has done a great progress. So the last, I think, 5 years, is that the number one cause of death is heart attack, rest of the country. The next is COPD, that is chronic obstructive. People have bronchial asthma. The number 3 is heart, this brain attack or strokes. And then, of course, you have maternal child health problems, you have diarrhea, you still have infections, you have all those things. So India seems to have a double whammy. So you have these infections, you also have these things. So we should know about brain attacks. The other thing, like as I speak, when I say one stroke every 40 seconds, one stroke every 4 minutes, now this is changed. That as I'm speaking, that 20 seconds, someone in India is having a stroke. Every 2 minutes, someone is dying of a stroke. We should all be aware of that. Correct? Now, the other thing is that strokes are not happening to people who are just 60 years, 70 years, 80 years old. Strokes are happening to young people. So, in fact, we have our own publications which say that less than 40 years, 30 years, 25 years, people are dying of a brain attack. So it's not, there are pediatric strokes, which are a different thing, but don't think the stroke is only happening to someone who is old. And this is our publication. And now stroke as such is when, one, the blood vessel is ruptured, so there is bleeding. Okay, in the brain, or the blood vessel is clotted, there is no blood supply, what we call as an ischemic stroke. Dhirubhai Ambani died of a stroke. Now, he's the richest guy, but he had a brain attack where the blood vessel blocked. But it was a massive stroke. A huge blood vessel which passes through the neck area, which is what we call as carotid artery. One carotid was cut off, so he was dead, in spite of being the richest guy in the world. And he could go anywhere where he could take him. But then brain doesn't give you that time. That's the problem. So the warning signs, when do you think you can have a brain attack? So I told you, each and every part of the brain subserves a certain function. The blood supply is cut off, that part of the brain dies. So there's a sudden lack of that function. So sudden weakness, that everybody knows, isn't it? Suddenly there is haath pair mein, there is no power. Lakwa, pakshagat, whatever you call that. Or there's a sudden loss of speech. There's one which is going on a YouTube, it's gone viral, about someone, a bank manager who was giving a farewell speech. He slurs and he falls down. This has gone viral. It was a massive brain attack. Sudden loss of vision. So sudden loss of whatever function you can think of. When there is a suddenness of loss of a function, even extremely severe headache where there is, nothing like what you have. Otherwise, headache is a commonest complaint that people have. but a sudden severe headache which you've never experienced before. So remember that suddenly something happens which is out of the ordinary. It could be a brain attack, and that it's an emergency. So the most important thing when we say attack is because we want to put it as an emergency. The moment there's an attack, then you respond to it in an emergent manner. That's the reason, like heart attack, we say is a brain attack. If there's a heart attack, what do you want to do? You'll run to an emergency. It's the same thing that you need to do if you suspect a brain attack. There's a whole lot of advancements which have taken place in managing a brain attack. We have all these huge gamma of investigations. How many of you heard of a CT scan? Right? Wonderful. You also heard of an MRI? Yes. So the MR actually we use a lot in our research as well. So quickly we will be able to know that if it is a brain attack, which blood vessel is blocked or it is burst, and what is the surviving area which is there. You see, what happens is when a blood vessel is blocked, then there is an area which is probably dying very fast, and there is a whole lot of surrounding area which is dying but not dead, what we call as ischemic penumbra. Probably something, I don't know whether we have a penumbra in astronomy as well. The word. So we call that because it's an area which is from complete lack of blood supply to it goes peripherally, which is lesser and lesser jeopardized. So the trick is to salvage that area which is not dead yet, so you bring back to life. What is the core which is already dead? There we have some advances right now in the form of stem cell therapy and all. We're trying to replace dead neurons, which is probably on the horizon, maybe in the near future, but not yet available right now. Right now, we're going to stop the dying brain from being dead. So is that possible? Yes, it is possible. And this has got what we call in scientific terms a level 1 evidence. It's got a grade A recommendation. That means it's universally acceptable. It's been there since the year 1995. And this is what is being practiced. Now that's a CT machine, if somebody has seen that. And this is how the brain looks on a CT scan. Okay. So if you have infarct is a dead brain, and the dead brain looks dark. All right. And this is a clot busting drug which we use. So let's start off with case studies. Okay. So you just imagine there's a 50-year-old man. He's a businessman and he is living in Guwahati. Say, when I talk in Delhi, I'll say that he's staying in Delhi. Now, he had a brain attack. Okay. He was sitting in his breakfast table. Suddenly he stopped talking. There was a deviation of the face, and his right hand and leg just slumped. He fell down. So the family knew, oh, this is a brain attack, lifted him, rushed to the, say, GNRC. Okay, in 30 minutes, they reached GNRC. GNRC has a well-oiled machinery, so they could identify. They did a CT scan. They found that it's not a bleed. It is a blood vessel which is clotted. So you have to unblock the vessel, isn't it? Simple. There's no rocket science. A vessel is blocked. You unblock it ASAP. So they gave the drug, what we call as a clot busting agent, which is a thrombolytic drug, and he improved in 40. So when we say door to needle time is the moment they come to emergency to the injection of that clot lysing drug. He received it, he improved in 48 hours, and he was fully independent. 1 month later, he's just as good as he's never had a thing before. Now that's a success story, correct? But you also have another kind of case studies where you're a 45-year-old. Again, the reason I'm putting up 45 and 50 years is because that's the common age now we are seeing all these strokes. So you have a shopkeeper. Now say that this guy is, say about 50 kilometers away from Guwahati. He's had a same thing. Now he doesn't have, I don't know, do you have ambulance service 108 which works here? Excellent. So Delhi doesn't have it. So we have probably, he had to take a local taxi, went to district hospital. The district hospital doesn't have a, existing CT machine, doesn't work. Even if it is there, it is gathering dust. So he sent to a private CT center. He gets a CT, poor guy, he borrows money, pays for it. Comes back to district hospital, 12 hours. 12 hours is already over. So this guy says, oh, you have a stroke, but then nothing works in the district hospital. So then he gives aspirin. Then he's told, okay, you eat your aspirin, you do physiotherapy. He's bedridden. He's paralyzed. He can't walk, talk. Okay. So he goes back home. The wife becomes the caregiver. The son, who is 10th, he drops out of school, can't give his boss, and he sits in the shop. So isn't that a common story? Isn't that the a normal low socioeconomic middle class? In fact, any one of us could be a victim like this if you don't have the right treatment available at the right time. Remember that time is the most crucial factor to protect your brain if there is something happening there, whether it is a trauma, what we call as a road traffic accident where we say golden hour. In a brain attack, it is 4.5 hours. Okay, so the trick is that you need to have a medical treatment available, accessible, affordable to you as soon as possible, because these things can happen to any one of us. It can happen to our loved ones, right? So why is that? Why do I say the time is brain? Like, when heart attack was talked about, it was said that time is heart muscle. Now we say time is brain. The thing is, if there's a blood vessel which is blocked, every second that the vessel remains blocked, you have so many millions and trillions of neurons which are lost forever. In fact, they say every hour that the vessel remains blocked, you have 120 million neurons lost, 830 billion synapses lost. Most important, if you have a major stroke, it's just not a life lost or a disability. The guy has aged 36 years. That is not even something that we even talk about. So a guy had paralyzed, he probably would improve, but suddenly he's no longer the same person. The personality has changed. Remember, this is brain. So it's not just, the ability to walk and talk, it is ability to memorize, it is your cognition, it's your behavior, personality. The person who is docile and nice and very, affable will become aggressive and angry and will have outbursts. Suddenly the person may have become what we call as a vascular dementia, and that's a loss of what we call as a, not just quality of life, it is one's own self-respect. It's a terrible thing to be alive and be disabled. That's a fate which is worse than death. So you must remember that these kind of things, that's the reason they say that time is brain, which is an adage which is world over, and this is what we are trying to impress even in India.